everybody, welcome to the Pro Physique Code, or welcome back. Welcome. Happy freaking New Year.
There might be new people.
What's up? I know, right? So, New Year, new you, new podcast. Welcome. I am Stephen Bogran, one of our coaches and directors here at Pro Physique, with Mrs. Christina Castle and Mr. Tyler Weeb.
Next job for you is working at like a stadium.
Hey, well, yeah. Anyways, look, it's not quite as bad because like my friends figure this out, a $400 pair of snakeskin boots, like cowboy boots, brand new, price tag still on them. Somebody left them in an Airbnb. Nobody ever claimed them. So guess who's getting some new boots on the freebie?
I like
it's gonna be me. So we're gonna be bringing Cowboy Steve one of these days.
I want to see you running down the street at the Arnold in those things.
I was gonna say we're gonna need a full outfit, and actors or it didn't happen. Like I need like a full method actor character here.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, like real Doc Holliday.
Yeah. I'll be your Huckleberry.
Yeah. That worked out so well.
Yeah.
Oh man. Okay. We are off to a good start for the new year here. So today we're chatting about something I feel like everybody's probably getting super inundated with right now, but it's always nice to kind of hear different perspectives and ideas with it. But we're going to talk about goal setting and the intelligent way to go about it to set yourself up for success, as opposed to being, I always forget the statistic, but it's something dramatic, like the number of people that fail or give up on their New Year's resolutions. Isn't it like by week 3 or something, week 2 or 3?
Pretty high, I think. I don't know the exact percentage, but it's certainly above 50%.
I'm going to the Googles, guys.
That's what I'm about to do. So obviously my New Year's goal is just to be Cowboy Steve, at least at some point in the year. But it says that researchers suggest that only 9% of Americans that make resolutions complete them. In fact, research goes on to show that 23% of people quit their resolution by the end of the first week, and 43% quit their resolutions by the end of January.
End of January.
Thank you, Google and Fisher College of Business, for this update from February 2nd of 2023.
Research.
I love it. We'll be providing a full list of our references. So it's rough, right? And I feel like the big thing, and I'm already starting to get like some people reaching out on Instagram or even in like some check-ins with newer clients and stuff where they're asking like, okay, so we're doing this now, December, what is it? The 6th today. Sorry, broke the fourth wall. We're recording this early and then releasing it in January. And it's like, okay, so I know we're doing this now, but that first week of January, we're going to be ready to like switch gears and go like full into fat loss before my trip the last week of January, right? And I'm like, I don't know. And for some people, maybe it's going to work out with things, and like that's always nice when it works that way. But I feel like the first week of January, we were looking at a lot of hot and heavy, like big goals where they're giant. We don't have a lot of the small steps laid out along the way to help make sure that we get there. And then I feel like the timelines are generally, at least half of what they should be.
Yeah.
It's interesting because I don't dislike the beginning of the year as like, okay, cool. It has that feel like we all kind of like associate it with new beginnings and new things starting. So for me, like I get a lot of the same. I like using the new year as like a start point because it's when all the holidays are done too. So it is maybe a little bit more realistic and feasible to say, okay, cool. Well, maybe I'm going to start dialing in my diet a little bit more. Maybe I'm going to start dialing in my cardio a little bit more. And obviously I still work with a lot of people who compete or who are wanting to compete.
Yeah.
So for the schedule for us, it gives us a pretty good amount of opportunities for those people that are at, the national level and they need those shows, and how you schedule that matters. But I would say most people, it's like the thing I run into more often than not, it's that timeline. It's the timeline that's maybe not quite as realistic as we would hope. And like, that's a hard conversation to have because I always feel like a bit of an asshole like, you know, like I'm the pigeon, you know, pooping on their head, like ruining their day. Where it's like, hey, we can make this happen, but the timeline's probably going to need to look a little bit different.
Yeah.
And so like having the opportunity that hopefully they allow me to take a step back and be like, all right, this is why the timeline needs to look different, because healthy rates of loss are, you know, probably around 1% of body weight per week. That way we can hold on to more muscle, you know, talk about, okay, we don't want to have to force things. We want to make it realistic. Like the diet that works best is the diet that works for you, that you can do, right? So it's normally like not necessarily taking the bait out of the water altogether, right? Or taking the carrot off the stick, but maybe changing the sticks and saying, okay, well, we don't need a 3-foot stick. We need a 6-foot stick. It's a little bit further away than you feel like it is, or than maybe you want it to be. But if we actually take the time to do it right, it can last.
Yeah.
And it can like be something that we take on more than just a week or a month or the first 3 months of the year, whatever it might be. Now we can like accomplish that goal and have it accomplished for long term.
Yeah. And I think like that's the talking point I use a lot, like with the clients, like they'll come and, you know, want to lose body fat, and then they have a history of losing fat, gaining it back, losing fat, gaining it back. And I'll go to them and I'm like, do you really want to do that again? Like, was that fun? No, it was not fun. Like, we're not just here for the results. We're here for, like Stephen said, like that long-term sustainable result. And I think too, with timelines, for a lot of people, like unless they're prepping, you're going to want to bake in weeks where like they probably don't hit their macros, or you're going to bake in a couple of diet breaks in there. And so then that changes the timeline. So I think, you know, having that is pretty important. And then, yeah, keeping that carrot at the end of the stick of like, yeah, like we're going to get there, but that timeline is just going to look a little bit different. You know, I was kind of looking at like SMART goals, right? At like the acronym, and the R is relevant. I like realistic more than relevant though. Like, I think that's the most important thing, like we were talking about, is also making sure that the goal is going to be realistic. Cause like having that discussion with someone of, oh, hey, I want to drop 40 pounds. Well, guess what? We're looking at least half a year of dieting. Like that's a pretty damn big goal. Like, is that going to be realistic for us? And so having that, did you see that the down?
What?
I don't know why like it's popping up like
what
that.
What was that?
Did you see that? Like the little thumb?
The reaction, I did see it. Oh,
I don't know. I don't know what setting it is. All of a sudden, my Zoom has been doing this. Like,
Okay,
I'll
if
do like a
this is not
thumbs
the
up, and it'll be like a
biggest
little
draw,
thumb up. Yeah,
I
don't know.
need everybody who's listening to immediately go to the YouTube, subscribe, because it makes me feel good.
Yeah.
And then go watch what just happened, because that I was like, that was rude of Zoom.
Yeah, because usually when I do a thumb up, there's like a little thumb up that will pop up. Anyways, like
That was amazing.
having that discussion of just the reality of it, right? And that goal. Because I think, you know, we've all done it before too. Like we've set goals, and like the expectation and the reality are completely different things. And so like that's where the kind of that coaching really comes into play for each individual client, and like talking to them, okay, you know, strengths, weaknesses, you know, what are these things that we're going to need to do and work on to get you to this big goal? And again, like maybe it's not this year we lose the 40 pounds, but maybe it's over the next year or two. And we have our longer diet breaks of 6 months where we're just eating at maintenance, things like that. So yeah, I think at this time it's really sitting down with clients, having those discussions, and being honest with ourselves of like, okay, truly, you know, where are things at and what's going to be realistic for me?
Well, that's where I like to keep in mind that, or like, I feel like I talk about this a lot with clients when we get close to these big, like, landmarks throughout a year, where like we know we're going to have that conversation usually around January, that they're going to want to make a change, right? Because it's like that, oh, I feel motivated, I'm ready to go, give me a challenge, I want it. And then it usually pops up again as we get closer to summer, right? Oh crap, can we do something to get me in a place that I want to be, you know, and like play catch up with it. Or you know, the ones that really get me is if something comes up that they're not in control of, and it's like, oh, I got invited to this wedding that now I want to be in a certain place for. And sometimes, even though these things happen like on the calendar, it doesn't mean your body's going to be in the most reactive, like good reactive like state for it. And we have to plan out like what's going to make the most sense, like with everything you said, with setting yourself up and having realistic expectations of what's going to be accomplished. there are just things that sometimes it doesn't make sense to try and fight with. And like, I really feel like the month of January ends up being like tough for some people, and they don't really hit their stride until we get closer to like February and March, because we're still coming off of the holidays. If we've had a holiday season where it was just like YOLO and we were living life, it's hard to go from that like immediately into like, oh, I'm a queen who's on like I've got everything under control and everything's going to be perfect, and make that transition. And so I think that's what gets a lot of people too, is they tell themselves they're going to go from not being on top of things to being perfect, because that's all that they'll accept for themselves. And then, it gets hard to stay that way by like day 10 or 11. And then that's why we see them fall off with things. And so I really like to use January to focus on like dialing in the very low hanging fruit of stuff, and like just getting way more comfortable with everything there so that we can later kick that can down the road. Because if we don't have something like an event that, like we're doing a March show or something, then we have all the time in the world. And I'd rather have the first 2 months of the year go really well for whatever the big goal is, because I feel like that's going to give us that awesome like confidence boost and like the big win of starting summer off where you want to be.
I mean, anytime you talk about having stuff together, I'm like, you guys have stuff together? Because my life just feels like a giant dumpster fire.
I mean,
Like-
that's why I love macro tracking, because that's one thing where I'm like, got that down. Don't have to think twice.
It's an interesting thing, because it's like, I think people get frustrated because they're like, oh, this is basic shit. Like, this is basics. And so like, I'm now currently, as of the past 24 hours, it's new, I'm trying not to say basics as much as fundamentals. Right? You're right. This is fundamental stuff. So if we can focus on getting the fundamentals down first, if maybe we're struggling with those or they're not where we want to be, that's how we build up to the more advanced topics. That's how we build up to the more advanced strategies. Like, we have to take care of big picture item first before we get to the other stuff. And I feel like, onto your point, what most people do is they're looking at the end goal so much so that they're treating themselves like somebody who's at the end goal. And so what ends up happening is they worry about what maybe those people need to worry about. But because we're not there yet, that doesn't need to be our focus per se. We should probably have our focus on something else. And because my life is a dumpster fire, I'm trying to stack wins on a regular basis.
Yeah.
So the goals that I set, I try and make easy, realistic, reasonable, so that, okay, cool, I can stack wins, because that's how I build my confidence in whatever it might be. Like, if I'm on going back to jujitsu when my knee's healthy, I ain't rolling with all the black belts. I'm gonna go smash white belts. I'm gonna smash white belts for months. Then I'm gonna start rolling with the higher belts again, because I gotta build my confidence so that I know that, oh, okay, yeah, I can do this. I have more confidence in this. I'm more comfortable in this. Now it doesn't take so much of my mental acuity, and it's not so stressful to try and manage it. And that's why you beat up the white belts.
That's why you find the tiny kids to beat up.
Yeah. Steven, you're not showing up with the 10-year-olds. Come on.
Oh, you're
I'm
right. I
here
could
to
go to
teach
kids
the
class
kids
too.
class.
Yeah, kids class. Yeah.
That's hilarious.
You'd be like Dwight in The Office showing up there. Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, and it's like everything else too, like flows out of the fundamentals. Like, everyone wants to major in the minors, I feel like, when it comes to like nutrition side of things. And it is just about establishing the habitual, habit of just tracking your food most days, every day. Like, I'll tell people, like, life doesn't care that you want to look good. Like, it's just gonna keep being fucking busy, dumpster fire, whatever. So if you can't track your macros at maintenance when your life is crazy, guess what? You're not going to be able to track your macros when you are dieting, and then you are even more hyper food focused, and there's events going on and this and that. And so, like, anybody that comes to me that wants a diet that, hasn't tracked much in the past, hasn't tracked at all, it's automatic 3 months. I just want to see you be able to be consistent with this, because everything else flows out of that. And if we can't do this, we're not going to get the other things. So if we're just going to jump right into a diet, all we're probably going to get is a bunch of frustration out of both of us, right? Like, this is just, there's a disconnect here. So it seems so basic, but like, it's honestly the things that make it all work. Like it is like, it's one of the simplest things we can do. And it's like, what else in life can you do the minimal effective dose and get amazing results, right? Like there's not much else in life that you can do that. Like, yes, the consistency part is hard, but it's not going to be in the sense of like what you actually have to do, like this big thing, like the low hanging fruit, like Christina said.
I
I
think
feel
that
like it would be like if Willy Wonka got an HR person. Like they wouldn't have to do much. You just have to keep the kids from getting killed.
Yeah.
Like that's it.
Yeah.
minimal effective dose of HR.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that's the big takeaway from like what you just said, that I think the new year ruins for everybody is that because everybody wants to be like, that's it. I'm giving up sugar and gluten and dairy and also meat and fresh air. And I'm not going to look at color blue and
fun.
like, it's going to be great. And, they make this huge list for themselves and like, I'm ready to shake it off. I'm ready to commit. And it's like, no wonder it feels impossible immediately because it's just too much. And then when you have the conversation of like, well, we're just going to do the bare minimum and see how that goes. It's understandable why a lot of people are like, but I have this huge thing I want to do. How are you going to give me this tiny like project for it? But it really is like, if we can't get this one thing down, we're never going to get the rest of it down. Like if we can't figure out how to get things feel smooth here, then what are we supposed to do down the road? And so that's where just like, as soon as you can, dialing in, if you think about the person that you see yourself being, if it's like, okay, well, once I've accomplished this and, I've been consistent, I've lost the weight, I'm that person who goes to the gym or like whatever it is, think about who that person is and what they do. And then start doing it. And you don't even have to do like 100% effort, but like start getting your feet wet and then build it up in like one area or another. And like, it's literally just the faking it until you finally feel like you've made it. And like, that's the hard part is we really just, do we ever make it? Like we just find a new thing that then we're trying to work on. Yeah. But it's just showing up with that attitude every day of like, well, I'm just going to do everything I think is going to work for this, and having a plan for like the direction that you're walking.
Well, I think one of the other things too that a lot of us forget or miss is we talk about it with like macros and dieting and stuff. And like, hey, if you can't see yourself doing this diet in 6 months from now, it's probably not the right diet for you, right? It's probably not the most realistic thing. But we don't always talk about that with exercise, right? Not everybody's trying to be a bodybuilder. Cool. Maybe you just want to be healthy. Maybe you just want to, be able to run a quarter mile in a certain time, or hit a half marathon or a 5K or 10K, whatever it might be. Like there is something to be said for kind of knowing what your preferences are. Hey, I really like biking. No, I really love swimming. Oh, I like endurance sports or rock climbing. And focusing your goals around, or your physique related goals and your health and fitness goals around stuff that you actually enjoy, because you know what you're more likely to do? Stuff that you like. Yeah. If you hate lifting weights, you're like, no, it's the worst thing ever. I can't stand it. I'm still going to argue that, yeah, lifting weights would be good for you, but maybe we could make progress with something else like calisthenics or, band work and, those other kind of methods to still make positive progress for you in terms of maybe your weight loss or physique goals. It's not only one way to do it. And so you don't want to, like, back to pigeons again, you don't want to pigeonhole yourself into only saying that only one way works, because there's different ways you can do it. And there's definitely some ways that are going to, like, for you as an individual, not only help you reach your goals, but make that life while you're doing it substantially better, which is like a cool thing, right?
Yeah, I feel like, people put so much expectations on themselves too, that like, it just buries them. Like, Christina was talking about, the clock strikes midnight and it's like, yeah, no more sugar, no more this. And it's just like all these expectations. And it's like, if you've never done any of this on a semi-consistent basis in the past, again, like you're not going to be able to have that success. And I had something else to say, but now it's gone.
The question, what do you have people do that, like, say they come to you and they're like, hey, I want to cut sugar out. Like I always have soda and I have all these snacks and I have all this other stuff. Like what's your go-to for something that you feel like is a simple, tangible goal for them that you like to utilize?
I mean, I think it's context based. Like if someone's, let's say, drinking three regular sodas a day, it's maybe, hey, let's cut maybe that back to one and substitute some Diet Coke in if they're really not wanting to give up all of the soda, right? If they are ready to go and give up all of the soda, it's like, all right, let's just transition to the diet soda. I just was actually talking with one client, and at night, like he's not used to having this many carbs. And so like he's just like, oh my goodness, like, but then he gets caught up in it. And at night he's watching TV, and before you know it, he's had all this stuff. So it's like, okay, well, let's still have it, but let's plan for it. Like put that in at the beginning of your day, knowing you want a treat at the end of the night while you're watching your TV show. Like it's those type of things. And I think it's just more so being aware, right? Like I think that's the biggest thing. And realizing like you don't have to go from one extreme to the other, because that's just, for the most part, not going to work for a lot of people. So like, let's find that middle spot, right? And if you're someone that goes, I either I can't or I can have it type of thing, right? Well, then, okay, then maybe there's something a little bit deeper. Maybe that is a trigger food for you. And maybe we just do need to remove it for a certain amount of time, right? Like it's really going to come down to what's going to work best for the client. What are they going to enjoy the most? What's going to allow them to be the most consistent with their plan? And so it might be trying a couple different things of like, okay, you know what? That didn't work. That's fine. Let's try this. Let's try that. Like there's so much you can kind of do on a client to client basis. And this is actually what I was going to say. I've been having this discussion a lot with clients is the life part of lifestyle, right? We talk about this being such a lifestyle, right? And so we want to like, life is going to be busy. And so how do we manage all of this lifestyle through the craziness of life, right? Because again, I kind of come back to, it doesn't stop being busy. It doesn't stop being crazy. So that is also a big part. Like, let's actually focus on that, because again, that's what's going to lead to the most success. Let's not have all these massive expectations on ourselves to do a complete 180 and change completely who we are. Like that's just not going to happen overnight. It's going to take time. Like you look at anything, any skill, you're going to suck at it at first. Let's like start off easy. Let's start off like things that we know we can accomplish, and we can build from there. And then we can really incorporate the life part into the lifestyle.
Yeah. I think so many people think it's like normal to just be miserable, like with stuff. And they think it's like, oh, you just get used to it or something. Right.
That's not everybody's life.
Well, I think like we're supposed to have a healthy dose of irritation is like the wrong word, but like things where it's like, oh, it's annoying that I have to do this, but like I'm going to. I think that's like a good thing to get better at. And I think that's one thing, a major thing that holds a lot of people back from what they're trying to do, is that as soon as it gets like I'll hear all the time about macro tracking. It's like, oh, well, it's annoying to have to open the app and do that. And I'm like, if that's the most annoying part of your day, then like, that's amazing. And if we just get better about, and like
a good life.
Right. And it can be, we can find ways around that. Right. And if somebody is really against it, then yeah, like we're going to do something else, because I don't want you to be miserable and doing something you hate forever. But like one of the things all of my clients get in their program is an outdoor walk. And I'll be like, unless it's raining, because then I'm on your team. Nobody likes to get rain in their face. But like, if it's cold,
umbrella,
if it's hot, whatever, like, no, umbrellas suck. They don't actually.
Have you never had a romantic kiss with somebody in the rain where they pick you up and swing you around?
Oh, I would literally be like, let's go over there. Like, I hate rain on my face so bad. Like, what are you doing? We're in the rain. Let's go. But, I add in the 10-minute outdoor walks. And I mean, I hate them too when it's like super cold outside, where like, I don't want to get out there. But then once you get going, you're like, oh, I did it. And it can be exhilarating, and like that confidence building piece that we talked about from the beginning. So I feel like really diving into, I loved the talk of like the why, because if somebody tells me they are giving up all sugar, it's like, why? Like, why do you want to do that?
So you're giving up veggies and or
Right.
in sweet potato and
Well,
all
and
of, well,
that's
no, the other sugar.
right.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I've talked to both though, where they're like, I can't do fruit because it's too high in sugar, you know? And so that's how I'll try to work around that too. Is like, okay, so if you have like a big sweet tooth or whatever, let's start adding more fruit into your day. And like we can jazz it up if you want like strawberries with chocolate or like Ready Whip as my jam. And like make it something delicious. Like let's start from a place of like, oh, it's not that I can't have this. Maybe I'm just changing what I'm having. Like you were talking about with the Diet Coke. Can you imagine swapping 2 Cokes for 2 diets? That right there is like 320 calories. And you still get to maintain the like habit and the bubbles and like things like that. So there's a lot of things that you can do, going back to the low hanging fruit and the confidence and all of that. There's so many things that you can just kind of clean up a little bit or just make like small shifts at like each meal opportunity, where maybe there's just one thing that you work on there that can really launch you forward. And that's not even just if you're like brand new to it or anything. Like I have not super dialed in tracked in like forever. And then I was like, you know what? I'm gonna get better about that. And it's funny because even I've taken I talked to Paul last week and was like, I'm gonna start checking in again. And of course, then went on vacation. And so now I'm back to trying to be like 100% with everything. And I'm like, man, I was definitely snacking more than I thought because I'm hungry.
Yeah.
Like,
Same
and
here.
so sometimes you just have to do that, like check in with yourself. And I mean, that's my intention with this year is like, I just want to be a bit more intentional with the things that matter to me. And then also build in a lot of that like grace and fun with stuff, you know? And so taking this time to just sit down and like look at like life across the board. Why is it that I want to reach this goal? Like, what are the things I'm willing to do? What do I not want to do? And like, what are the things we need to pay attention to that say, like, this is too much or this is wrong for me? Because I'd rather hear about it from a client that, like, I hate weightlifting. Like, for someone to just tell me, like, that's why I don't go. I always tell you it's this or that. Like, I'd rather them just fill me in so I can be like, Jesus, let's find anything else for you to do that makes you happy. But the sooner you kind of pay attention to those and then realize that you're supposed to be enjoying your life and that this should still be like a joyful addition, even if it brings some discomfort, is like a big step.
This should be fun. At the end of it, this should be fun.
Ugh. My thing is, and I know it's
Even
very
doesn't like
popular.
fun.
No,
I
Steven
love fun.
Steven's no
It's just-
fun.
It's difficult when your dopamine doesn't work right. Right. What I always try to remind people is that it's very popular right now for everybody to be like, you're supposed to be happy. And people kind of extrapolate that to be like, you should be happy all the time. And I don't think that that's realistic. Like, you have to do hard stuff if you want to grow. No stress is just as bad for you as too much stress. Just like there is good stress, eustress, and bad stress, distress. And so really health, we call it homeostasis, right? Being within this range. It is a range. So yes, there's top ends, and yes, there's low ends to maybe where we want to be with stuff. But when we're all the way at the ends and we're outside of like those normal parameters, that's when things become unhealthy. Oh, we're working out for 5 hours a day. Probably not the healthiest thing. Oh, we're eating 10,000 calories a day. Probably not the healthiest thing. Yeah, there might be a Michael Phelps outlier that's getting paid to be an Olympic gold medalist, but hey, that ain't me, dog. So it's difficult because we want to have hard answers, and I get it. Like I love knowing like something's right, something's wrong. But the truth of the matter is, life has a lot of gray areas, and there might be a gray area for me. It might be a different area of right or wrong for you. And it changes from person to person. So like there's that dangerous thing that happens when they say, oh, you have to do this, you have to do that. Like you have to lift weights. You have to cut out all sugars. You can't have any sugars. Well, fructose is a sugar, but it's not the same as sucrose. It's not just pure glucose, right? So it doesn't really digest the same way. It doesn't have the same impact on blood sugar. So is all sugar bad? Or are you saying that just like table sugar is bad, right? what is it? And so the problem becomes, one, lots of gray area, and two, people don't make delineations on stuff. They just give you a hard rule and say, this is it.
Yeah.
And then we make those goals based on that, and we try and live our lives based on that. And man, it just sets you up to fail. It's like me going in for a trigonometry test when I just failed freaking algebra. Like, hey, ain't going to be a good time. It's the ski instructor from South Park over and over again. And so I think inherently a lot of us have that idea that like there is some gray area here, and we have some good ideas, at least of what we think or what we feel like works well for us. And that experience and intuition, I think, does speak to wisdom to a certain degree for some people, right? Because we have to work into that, and we have to lean into that at least a little bit to be realistic for what's going to work for us as individuals. And that's tough, because again, you want to look at the stupid magazine in the checkout line that says, I lost 30 pounds in 15 days. Did you though? Did you? And if you did, what the did you have to do that?
Well,
because
that's
I'm not going to do it.
Right. So, and that's how they have the audacity to put these ridiculous claims on something like a magazine that is mass produced and then pushed out to all of these people. It has to be something that's completely fucked, like 1,000-calorie diet or whatever, because yeah, if we give you the food that like is lower than what a toddler needs, and you're a grown adult who's probably doing like, you know, if we're looking at the magazines, then we're trying to do their workout plans. And like, you know, they always jump immediately to pretty high cardio. There's always the word HIIT thrown around. So if we're trying to do everything this magazine is telling us to do, yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if you did lose weight, like in the first like week or two, because now I look back and look at some of their programs, and, you know, what kills me is like they'll have all these articles about like weight training and things like that. But then they always show everything using like 1 to 2 pound weights, which I feel like it's like very confused messaging. But it's a lot to try and do. Right. And so if you are successfully doing that for a short period of time, yeah, maybe if you're going from having never looked at your food, you're the person having like 6 sodas a day, and like you're not doing any exercise and stuff, and then all of a sudden you clean it up and like do what they say. Yeah, you might be the person that loses 30 pounds in 15 days, but you're probably not going to be 30 pounds down at the 30-day mark. And
30 pounds up.
Yeah. And like then we have the rebound, right? And then you end up in this like back and forth place. And I mean, no wonder people get so frustrated and stuff. And then we're seeing the jumps to these things that sound sensational, because you get to a point where you're like, well, fuck, I've done everything else. Why doesn't this work? I might as well do this thing or whatever. And it's just because what ends up working is not very interesting.
But like when people talk about they've done everything else, it's like, okay, you've tried a lot of things. Okay, what was like, how intense were they? Like what end of the spectrum were they in terms of aggressive, non-aggressive, and how long? Right. Yeah. Most people, I have a couple people that I work with now that came to me at anywhere between 600 to 800 calories a day was what they were eating, with a lot of cardio. Healthy, well, air quote, healthy young individuals. Now, what they are going to have to do, because they've been doing that for a long time, is different than what I'm going to do. So like if they see me getting what I had the other day, I had ice cream the other day, right? Okay, there's ice cream on my story. And one of my messages, I was like, just don't look, right? Don't look for now. Maybe we're not at that spot. But did you do this stuff for long enough for you to keep the progress you've made, for you to stay in a good spot? Because it's the same thing you say that normally happens. Yeah, maybe we can do it for 15 days or 30 days or 45 days. But what comes after that? For me, I don't even necessarily think of just that initial weight rebounding game, because most of the time, if you lose a ton of weight really quick, it's water weight. You're talking, it's not actual body fat for a lot of people. So, okay, cool. We had some water weight fluctuation. Mine is, okay, if we diet really hard for a long time, and then over time, we just keep putting on weight. And over time, we can't eat what we used to eat and maintain weight. And now that's like the really dangerous thing, where now we don't even know how to control our weight anymore. Like, where's our maintenance? How do we fix this. And like, that's the real like culmination of it, right? Of all the on again, off again, on again, off again dieting is that, and we see it happen to so many people, that year after year, their normal weight just goes up, 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 until all of a sudden they're at a place they never thought they would be, that they never wanted to be, and they don't know how to get back out of it because they keep going for these short-term fixes on something that truly requires like lifestyle, long-term thinking.
Yeah. Like I always tell people, like, depending on their age, you've got 30, 40, 50 more years of this. Like, yeah, like let's focus on the short-term goal. I still think like that's a good thing to have, but like let's also see this big picture of like, I'm pretty sure I've said this multiple times on this podcast, like the better benefits from a healthier lifestyle is longevity and quality of life. It's not necessarily the aesthetics of it. I mean, it's a great side piece. Don't get me wrong. Like, no one doesn't like looking good, right? Like that's obviously awesome, but the benefits outside of that just outweigh everything else. And so again, like kind of coming back to just focusing on that life part of the lifestyle, like that's where you're going to get the most out of it. And like, for myself now, kind of getting to my mid-30s, you really start to see the forks in the road of who's taking care of themselves and who's not, right? Like you really start to see it. And like I've got friends who are like at my age and they've got the bodies of 50, 60-year-olds already because like there's no taking care of yourself at whatsoever. And so like now you start to multiply that over the next decade, 2 decades, 3 decades. What are you going to get? And so I think, yeah, having like just even that type of long-term view of this, like it went off again.
That's like terrible timing.
Like mic drop, just go.
Absolutely terrible timing.
That lifestyle, like it's it's gonna be, it's just so important. I'd love to know what setting that is and what happened.
I'm like, I want to find it. I'm jealous.
Yeah, right. Because like I've been doing this like for myself, like I've been doing this now for close to 10 years very seriously. And like, yeah, it's not always going to be about those aesthetics because there are going to be those ebbs and flows of your life where it may just not be a priority. Like for me, the last 6 months, Christina, you were talking about it. Like I haven't tracked a single thing. Like I put on 10, 12 pounds in a couple months. Like I kind of, for myself, let myself go. I was training once, maybe twice a week, hated training at that time. And you know what? Like I just kind of stepped back and he was like, you know what? This just isn't happening right now. But coming into December, ramping things back up again and getting back into the flow. And for me, it's just like, I just track 70, 80% of my food right now. Like that's just, for someone who's been doing this for 10 years, that's my goal right now, is just to be able to track and train on a consistent basis. Like that's all that I care about right now. And so I think like, it's important to talk about that, especially as coaches, because I think there's that expectation of like, oh, they're perfect all of the time. They're always tracking, they're always on it. Like, hell no. Like I struggle just as much as you do, but like, one, this is kind of my job, so I kind of have to do it. And two, like I really do love this lifestyle part of it. And so like, for me, it's just easier. But like, there's also things that I completely suck at that you're probably way better at me then, right? Like everyone's going to be a little bit different. So yeah, I don't know where I was going with that, but I think it is just important to kind of know that there's going to be those ebbs and flows and having that long-term view.
It's Amazon orders. That's what I suck at. I'm like, oh, this will make me feel a little bit better.
Get that little dopamine push from buy now.
Yes.
Totally.
Yeah.
That and the 2-day or like same day shipping. So like it'll be here this afternoon between 2 and 4. Yes. No, I think it is important to like have those conversations because I think a lot of people, especially like if they're, not quite at where they're like fully in the matrix yet, like if they're into it and then something goes wrong, like they're getting started and it really throws them off, like an injury or like something where it's like, okay, now you're sidelined for like 2 or 3 weeks.
Hey dude, come on. Ow.
Well, right. No, so you had like a while with your knee, but yesterday was my first day going back to lifting since since I tested my maxes like back in mid-November, because then somehow I literally just woke up like 3 days later and couldn't turn my neck like at all. And then I got super sick. And so then I just went from like trying so hard to get ready for that. And I was like, I'm going to start running. I'm going to get ahead of this marathon. And like, I was so excited. And then after that cheer competition, I like couldn't move. I got terribly sick. The kids got sick. And today was the first time I went back and like actually lifted, and like, or yesterday after like 3 weeks, 2-3 weeks. And I got my ass handed to me. Like everything felt very heavy. I was very annoyed because I was supposed to be hitting like 80% of my numbers, like was what was planned. And even that, I was like, this is horrific. I was doing like sets of 3 or 4. And it's really easy if you don't love going, or if you're not totally bought in yet, to be like, fuck it, I'm never going to feel like I'm winning with this. Like I'm so done. Or just not get there, like with like to where you still show up. And so it gets so much easier to just be like, well, I've already not been on plan for like 3 weeks. And so I guess this just isn't for me, is like what I'll hear. I'm just not the person who can do that or something. It's like, you just have to take that first opportunity to just go, and it can be a suck fest, but it's still a win that you made it there and like moved, and you're waking things back up, and we'll get somewhere. And so that's where I think the small chunks of like the big goals can be really helpful.
But I feel like that suck fest, I don't know why, it has me thinking about when I used to live in Ohio and my roommate stopped paying rent and the electric bill. And I was like, fuck this, I'm not paying your part of the bills. And so it was right before I moved back to Florida, and I lived without power for like 2 weeks in the house. And it just has me thinking about like, well, yeah, maybe paying bills ain't for me. Fuck that. Right. It's cool. Whatever. When the sun goes down, it's sleepy time. I'll go to somebody else's house to do laundry, you know? But then I'm also like, but if I start paying the bill again, then I get power. Then I have Netflix, you know, then I can charge my phone. Then I can do all the other stuff. So like, and I don't know, that's probably not the best like way to explain that, but it's like, yeah, even though if you messed up, and I think this is one of the big ones, the all or nothing mentality, like either I'm perfect or I'm not on at all. No, incorrect. There's a ton of like, hey, this is not, if you ain't first, you're last, Ricky Bobby. We're not, you know, at a elementary school on meth giving a speech about race cars. Like there's a lot of wins in between there. So like, and know that at any point in time, you can start back up again, or start doing the things that are going to get you to be successful again, or start getting you closer to that goal again. And that's still okay. Like those things are all cool. I think of like, and this is a question I've been asking more people recently. And I bring it up because it's like, how many people do you hear that talk about having a 6-month plan, or a 6-month goal, or a 1 year, or a 5-year plan, or a 10, 15, 20, 25-year plan? Those things used to be very normal. People used to talk about them. They used to be on TV shows, you know, like people would talk about, okay, what's your 5-year plan? Like, I don't know very many people anymore that have even a 1-year plan about where they want to go and what they want to do. Because when you look at it in a little bit larger spectrum, and not to say that those shorter term goals aren't still good. Like, yes, sometimes I want the carrot on the stick. Sometimes I need the carrot on the stick, but I also need to keep that in relation to what is realistic and the actual most important long-term goal. And if I don't think about that, that's when it's easy to get caught up in the, oh yeah, I'll just eat 0 carbs for the next, 4 weeks, and that's going to work for me. Or, oh yeah, I'm just never going to have sugar again for the rest of my life, as if donuts and Oreos and Cinnabon don't exist, right?
Oh, I love cinnamon buns.
I mean, I think everybody does.
Yeah.
It's one of those things where it's like, if you have to keep that long-term goal in mind. Yeah, I want to lose 20 pounds in 20 days. Sure. Yeah, that'd be great. But I would actually rather be 10 pounds down at the end of the year. I would prefer maintaining 10 pounds of weight loss by the end of the year than just lose 20 pounds and then be right back where I started, and or heavier in a way that is not going to benefit me, like with how I see my body.
Yeah, because it's like because you could even say like how many people actually are able to lose that 10 pounds and keep it off, right? Like
Yeah.
that's a big issue for a lot of people because we have those extreme things. And so like we kind of come back to the basics or the fundamentals of like, let's just see if we can lose some weight and keep it off, right? Like for a lot of people, that is a major win. That's life changing for a lot of people. And then it's like, okay, now we built that confidence. Now, okay, let's maybe go for that next 20 pounds or 10, whatever it might be. So, yeah, just even having that discussion and framing it in that sense of like, you've done this multiple times, like, and it just hasn't worked. Let's again find something that is going to work.
I love the idea of like 5-year plans with stuff, because if you really take the time to put the effort into it and like it's thought out and realistic and everything, there's so much you can do with that though within that small time frame. And like for somebody like me who just loves to like check something off the list, it gives you this opportunity for this insane like goal advent calendar as you work up to your 5-year plan where you can get all this different shit done. And that's where like I feel like it helps to have the super smallest of goals, like not looking at the 2 weeks or 3 weeks or like whatever, but literally today. Like, what did you do today to help you in that direction? So like, oh, you didn't have time for the gym, but you did go for a walk between meetings, and like you chose to get, the, I don't know, something like with higher protein at breakfast instead of just grabbing the blueberry muffin or whatever. And like adding those things up can be so impactful if you just say, I'm just going to get through today and do it in a way that makes me feel like at the end, I'm like, fuck yeah, I did that, and because it spreads out to other areas in life. And I feel like that's what a lot of people miss out on too. Our relationship with our body that we have to take everywhere we go. And that now, you're sitting here, you're looking at yourself in Zoom meetings probably, and you're having to like, maybe you're getting dressed and going to the office again and things like that. If you're spending all day mad at the body you're walking around in and like focusing on all of these like things that might not be as easy to manage like that day, it's going to ebb into your relationships with other people, with work, with how motivated you feel to say like, I can take on that project or promotion and things like that. And then you start working on being the person who keeps those commitments to yourself and just says like, I want to make sure I feel good 20 years from now. And so I'm putting in the effort in today. It bleeds out into higher confidence with other things, more comfort with discomfort, and all of that, where like now you're a completely different person at the end of 12 months or 36 months or something like that, as opposed to if you said, well, I'm just going to go keto for like 3 weeks and drop the 7 pounds of water weight. And then, it always works for that. But then this time I'll back out of it. Right. And it's like, okay.
But you're right. It changes your identity, right? It changes how you see yourself. Because I think one of the other things that's also equally dangerous is when we never look at ourselves. Because like I recognize that in myself. Like if I'm off, I don't actually look at myself in the mirror maybe as much, or I don't pay attention, or I don't weigh in. I don't actually look at myself to be maybe introspective on things maybe I could do better, things maybe I could change. And that can be a rough spot to be in too. But I think I love this story that I had from somebody that I used to go to church with. So for those of you who don't know me, I used to play bass for a pretty large church here in the Bay Area. And after that was kind of when I had started getting into lifting a little bit more. I had gotten into competition stuff, and I started having some more of the identity stuff and life stuff kicking in for me. I remember years after I had stopped going, I got a message from this guy, and I used to ride motorcycles with him. So we met up, we had lunch, and he said to me with the straightest face, like so honest, he's like, you know what, man? If you had asked me out of everybody that we knew at the church who was going to be the biggest fucking loser, you would have been at the top of the list. He's like, and I'm like, whoa, thanks, man.
you.
He's like, and he's like, but he stopped. He's like, but when I look at you, I see anything but. Like nobody had any of these expectations from you. You have done better for yourself, and you have done more, and you've been able to help other people, like more so than anybody would have thought. And it's funny because when I go back and I think about what probably helped me to have the opportunity to do that stuff, it was just keeping those little promises to myself every day. It was just doing the simple little things, because then that became part of who I was. And once that was part of who I was, it didn't take all the energy to have to do it any day, every single day or every single time, which meant now that extra bandwidth and energy and thought could go to the next thing and the next thing. And so it built on itself exponentially over time, which allowed me to get away from some 20-something-year-old that wasn't in college and living in his mom's house without a job into a guy who, I mean, I think isn't a loser, at least in normal standards.
No, we wouldn't hang out with you if you were. It's okay.
They don't actually hang out with me. We all live very far away.
We all live so far away from each
Yeah.
other. I think we're like the most spread out. Yeah. And it's so nice when you do have those things like fully integrate, right? Where you can just like confidently tell yourself, like, no, I'm the kind of person who does this, right? And then you just, and it's like, yeah, you are, like, from the inside, instead of feeling like a fraud with things. And I mean, it can just be, it's funny because like we love Star Trek, right? And so I always will joke about like a Klingon sense of honor.
Wait,
That's
who's
like
your favorite? Who's your favorite captain? If you
Jean-Luc.
really love Star Trek,
Jean-Luc.
Picard. Okay.
I literally, when I fly, because I'm terrified of flying, I have a little stuffy Jean-Luc that I like have with me.
Nice.
He's my guy.
That's not weird at all.
I know. I love him. Like, I'm obsessed with Patrick Stewart. So Worf, and his like sense of honor and how that like leads his life. Like, that's one of those things that's so silly, but we'll like talk to our kids about, like, this is a big thing. If you say that you're a person who like lives with honor, like, it means if you see something happen, like, you're the person who says something, or if you said you were going to do this, you're going to follow through on it. And that's not just on like, oh, I'm going to do the project, or I'm going to clean my room or whatever when I'm talking to my kids, but like, it's the same as saying, like, I told myself that I wanted to feel better, so I'm going to go for my walk today, or I'm going to do that yoga class, or whatever it was. And it's because if this is something that's dominating your thought patterns, where you're listening to podcasts about how to be successful with these changes, and like, this is something that's important to you, then you have to start giving it the same respect that you would give those other things. And it snowballs into something really awesome.
Do it for yourself, right? Like, all those small little wins. Like, if you have this big goal, you kind of got to go to that big goal and work your way backwards. And it's like, what are the steps that I need to take that are going to eventually get me there? And it's those small little things, like we've been talking about, that just build up over time. Like, it's the fundamental, like, cliches are cliches for a reason. It's like, it's because they actually like work. And like that, that is the thing you need to be able to do, is that process, the small little steps. Like, all of that is there for a reason. It's not just like this, like, hooey stuff. Like, it's going to take those small things to eventually snowball and get you to that big goal. And like, yeah, you don't have to do it for anybody else other than yourself. Like, that's, at the end of the day, that's what's going to matter. Like, when you are, in those early stages of maybe a new goal, you're having to lean into the uncomfortableness and make that decision. But like, you guys said, it becomes a part of your identity. And eventually you're not even making the decision anymore. It's just who you are. It's just what you do. Like, I don't feel like going to the gym. I went anyways because I'm on autopilot, essentially, when it comes to that. Like, I didn't even really think about it. Yeah, emotionally I didn't want to go, but I just went anyways. And so it does eventually become that. But yeah, you are going to have to lean into that uncomfortableness initially. Like, again, like, you don't become the best guitar player in the world by just being the best guitar player in the world. It takes those hours of practice, like that 10,000, 100,000 hours of like dedicating yourself to that craft. And is it going to be perfect? No, but it's that level of consistency that you're looking for, right? Like, you almost want to be like, look at like professional athletes, right? Like, there's highs and lows, but it's that consistency that makes the best athletes, right? And so maybe we're not at that level, but I still think that the principle of that consistency and those small things, still apply for any of us, and whatever goal you might have, in regards to your fitness journey.
And it goes back into like the guy who's going to play guitar for 1,000 hours really friggin' loves playing guitar. So, you know, I will say this again and again. Find the things you like. Find the things that bring you joy, that make life better, and figure out ways to incorporate those with activity for your health and fitness goals. Like, I do stuff I like more than I do stuff I don't like. Straight up, like I do stuff I don't like because I'm an adult, which seems like nonsense, but I have to. But still, I'm gonna do stuff I like a lot more.
Yeah. And I think that's a thing though, that a lot of people don't realize. They can just make that decision too. And like you said, it's not about everything. We're adults with responsibilities and like things we have to accomplish, but you can take that control over the rest of your life and have that agency with things and be like, this is what I want to be a part of. This is what I'm going to do today. These are the choices I'm going to make for me. And like, you can choose to err on the side of like the cup is half full as opposed to half empty when you look at that. And I think that's how you end up more successful with it too, for like when things get tough and it's just like, I'm a person who can get through this, and like I've gotten through everything before, I'm going to get through the end. And like truly believing that is like a game changer.
I'm a giant child, so I like to think of it as the sippy cup is half full.
I like that. That's because
it has the
you
twirly
haven't
straw.
had to clean very many sippy cups, Stephen. That's the game changer.
Not yet, at least.
Take the thing out, and then they're like yucky, and you find them.
Yeah, they're hiding everywhere.
Ooh, it's worse than a protein shake because it like solidifies. So Claire is now chewing the tip of sippy cups off and like completely destroying them, and I was like, the time has come, because she's like good with cups and stuff, and I'm like, maybe I'm just throwing it all away. I'm just getting rid of it. And I actually
finally done.
I'm just gonna send them to Steven because my sippy cup life is ending.
Well, that actually might not be bad timing because I have news. We're not pregnant, so we can throw them away for you. Actually, I'm just kidding. We'll recycle them.
I was like, there's no way he'd be dropping that on the podcast.
I literally just had so many emotions go through it because I was like, there's no fucking way this is how he's gonna tell us. But I was so excited that was what was happening. I was like, but maybe. Oh my goodness, that was mean. Okay, on that note, I feel like we got this one pretty good, but it's a whole new year, which means a whole new calendar of topics and things like that. We have the transformation challenge coming up like any day now from when this one goes out. Will be probably about 5 or 6 weeks from the start. So the start is going to be February 12th is like when the 90-day count begins. And so I'm sure at this point we have something amazing going on with signups and everything the first week of January. So if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me, Christina at ProPhysique, or I'm the one that hops into the YouTube comments too. So if you have any questions there about either some topics that you started thinking of after this podcast and questions that you think we should dive into to help make sure you're finding success. If you have any questions about any of our events at ProPhysique, just let us know and we'll make sure to point you in the right direction. Do you guys have anything else for us?
I have 10 fingers.
Speaking of children.
It's pointing.
Yes, Stephen. Good job. That's good counting. What about you, Tyler? How many do you have?
Well, I mean, I guess thumbs don't really count as fingers, so 8.
Winner. See, you have progressed into a higher grade because that's like a thing like 8-year-olds love to tell you.
Yeah. Mind blown when you first learned that.
Count.
What?
Wait, we were supposed to be counting thumbs too?
See, this is why you go back to watching the YouTube instead of just listening to it.
Don't know the gang signs?
Weirdo. Like,
that's all I got. I'm out.
I love it. Okay, so bye guys. Thanks for hanging out and we'll talk to you soon.